Y'all know who I am. I'm Leonard. I have a place next to J&D's over here. And I kind of defaulted into leading the Eurasian Water Milfoil management planning process, because I'm a aquatic scientist by trade. That's what I do for a living. I do lakes, streams monitoring. So this is kind of right up my alley. I bought a cabin up here to kind of get away from work, but work followed me, kind of a thing, but no big deal. Kirsten is in our office. I work for Hay and Associates, and we have 3 offices, one in Willow, Illinois, where I'm out of, one in Richland Center, and then one in Chicago. But we work with a lot of people, a lot of lake associations in both Illinois and Wisconsin for this type of situation. This isn't a unique situation at all. So it's just something that really hit the fan, I guess you can say, last year, right? I'm gonna hand around a sign-in sheet. Kind of get used to this for every meeting we have. We want to kind of sign in, because this is something, once we start getting grants, we can use this as like a cost share type of thing. So just a name, phone number, and email if you have it, would be great for follow-up stuff about meetings and where we're going from there. So I talked with Kirsten at our office about, after our last meeting. How many were here at the last meeting when we had Scott? Pretty much all of you, sure. What are our next steps? What do we need to do? And I didn't print a ton of these, but I printed a few. This is kind of a map, a timeline. I'll take one, kind of share of to go through the process that the state kind of requires. Like this is a timeline, or how it's spelled out. Yeah, email that. Yeah, I'm sorry about the colors.
So do you think this is just gonna keep getting worse?
Milfoil, yes.
What about just the actual weeds?
The native vegetation generally kind of manages itself for the most part. When milfoil gets in, it chokes out all of the native plants, and they don't grow. So if we can somehow get the milfoil under control and get back to kind of with the native vegetation, it doesn't usually get as bad as what we had last year. One thing that hopefully helped us a little bit this year is we had more ice and more snow. Hopefully the milfoil wasn't growing in February like it was last year. So that's kind of
So you're saying it could be less this year, or
that.
don't know?
I don't know. But I'm hoping it's less. Because hopefully that lack of sunlight for a while, didn't allow it to start growing earlier. But it wasn't a huge extended period of time. Remember back in the day, you'd get snow cover from Christmas through, April, and now that's a much narrower window. So that light's penetrating through, and plants are growing a lot earlier. So pray for snow.
Do you have any idea how much percentage the milfoil is?
No, so that's where we get into applying for an aquatic plant management grant. But really, before we can even do that, we need to find an entity that can receive that grant. Right now, there's no like Willow Lake Association or Pier Lake Association or anything like that. But we do have the Sportsman's Club, the Willow Region Sportsman's Club. So I'm a member because I pay the $5 every year, the picnic type of a thing, right? But we need to talk with the leadership there to find out, that's you?
I'm the president.
Okay, perfect. To see if they're willing to be the grant recipient. And then we can start, applying for a aquatic plant management grant. Briefly, how the state works is, they manage, or they can control what goes into the lake. So we can't just put a chemical into the lake to treat the milfoil without getting the proper approvals through the DNR. And in order, like Scott was kind of saying, and I really gauged from his meeting that he's pretty much anti-chemical. I do have a couple case studies from other lakes up here, where they've gone through the system with the state to eventually get a treatment, but it's like a 4 or 5 year process. You have to do all of these other steps before they can finally say, yeah, that didn't work, you can use a chemical.
In our previous meeting, someone had mentioned, or we talked about the possibility of maybe drawing down the level of the lake to try to kill some of that. Is that still an option or possibility?
That's something that you can address come like winter, you'd have to be in the fall, and you want it to, a drawdown's work is you lower the water so that when it freezes over, it freezes solid to the lake bed, and then hopefully that freezes out the plants. That's how a drawdown would work. That was something, again, we'd have to work with the dam management, and I don't know if that's at Oneida County or the town. That's the Sportsman's Club?
Yes,
Okay,
we got a signed agreement with Oneida County
okay,
on levels that maintain.
okay. So that's something we'll have to work through the Sportsman's Club in Oneida County, on that agreement that they have. So that, that's something to look into, for sure, yes. So if we can get an entity to, I brought that other one, to be the grant recipient, Hay and Associates, shameless plug. We work with, like I said, lake associations to facilitate the, applying for the grants and all of that. And Kirsten, and she can talk a little bit about that. We've been very successful in these aquatic plant management grant applications, receiving the grants, and then getting the work implemented. So, and it's kind of how she has it outlined a little bit here. Can't really read it, but yeah, define an organization for eligibility. That's what I had just mentioned. And then prepare and apply for the grant. And then that would be the fall of this year, because September is the deadline to get your grant applications in, and then the grants would get awarded in the spring of 26. So we're a little bit behind the 8 ball. However, we can start collecting some of the data this summer already to once with volunteers, and I'm willing to volunteer my time and professional time to come up here. And at the last meeting, I don't know if I brought those notes or not, there was another lady who had attended and is part of another consulting firm that does aquatic plant monitoring. So, and she's got a place on the north west side of the lake. So, but that's something where just a couple people, it'll be over a few weekends because the lake is 430 acres, but going out and sampling the aquatic plants when they're in full growth, so we can get a density and species of what's in the lake and how much there is. Like we were just talking, is it primarily milfoil? What other pondweeds and lilies and stuff are out there? So that's all stuff that needs to be developed, and then you can create aquatic plant management plan. And once you have this really helps you get funding for the next step, which the state does like to require monitoring at all of the access points. So, down by the bridge, probably at J&D's, probably at Bucksnort, just people coming in and out, having somebody there with information saying, they call it their Clean Boats, Clean Waters program, just letting them know, hey, you need to make sure, not removing plants and stuff like that. And they usually have you do that, for a year or so. And then, I can pass this around, or at the end of, come and look at this, but, this is another lake in Violet County, Muskellunge Lake. My cousin actually lives on this lake, and this is, what they had to go through. Their milfoil was first discovered in 2016. Do we know when it first appeared in our lake? I've only been here since 2020. What's that? It's been here for a while. Not like this, right? Because the state does have an early detection grant that if it would have been within like the last 4 or 5 years, we could have applied for something like that. But there's also, it's got to be in a much smaller, we're disqualified because we're not in the small acreage, because it's pretty much 400 of our 430 acres. So, so they went through this whole process, this is kind of good to, if you guys wanted to look at this at the end of what they had to go through before they could finally get a treatment, but it's kind of outlined in this outline that I shared with you there. So, Kirsten, did you have stuff you wanted to chime in on?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of would lay out a similar kind of pathway again that Len, you and I know have talked about, and actually I should probably, can everybody hear me all right?
I'll bring this closer, but that timeline or that outline that you shared in Excel, that's what I handed out to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we have we have a little bit of flexibility here. DNR is very good at, structuring out their grant program in which there is financial support for every step of the way here, from, developing a plan, which would be a survey, and again, a written document in terms of recommendations and strategies for control. They have annual grant opportunities for implementation of that plan. So whether it's, a drawdown or manual harvesting or renting a harvester for a period of time to try to manage it, there's, again, money for that every year. And then Len mentioned, again, you guys are kind of like on a 3-year window to do chemical treatments before we may open the box and say, you know what, that's really the best tool we have in the toolbox for managing this stuff long term. So again, we have some options here. The first priority, as Len mentioned, is identifying an eligible entity in order to apply for and receive grants for the DNR. They have a really great application guidance that kind of goes through all of the steps for organizational eligibility, which I have sent him and can walk you guys through as well. But that's pretty straightforward. And then kind of the process that would happen, I guess there's 2 options really. The first of which is to decide we want to apply for a aquatic plant management plan this fall, which would mean we do the survey, and which is, the volunteer effort that Len mentioned, and we, write an actual plan document in the summer of 2025. And then we would go for another grant in the fall of 2026, and your first year of actual treatment would be 2027. Again, that non-chemical kind of first stab, try to get things under control a little bit, knowing that you're really just kind of igniting the progress towards likely eventually trying to utilize Procellicor or some chemical treatment if it does come to that. The other option too is to try to get a jump on it a year early. We could try to do the survey and do the plan writing this year. That obviously wouldn't be covered by a grant, so that would have to be out of pocket. We could put together a budget of what that may look like in terms of, again, volunteer effort and where you may need professional assistance. And then we'd be applying for that first year treatment grant this fall, and then you'd be a jump ahead, and your first treatment would be in your quote unquote treatment, your first active management year be the summer of 2026. So again, I think there's an option to kind of speed up the timeline here if we're really trying to get this stuff under control, which it seems like it is. But again, I think there's obviously cost implications to that, and understanding what this growing season may look like, which is coming up here pretty soon, before you guys may be ready to actually make that decision of, can we just press go and go, or do we want to plan this out, maybe have a year lag, but again, have a little bit more financial support in terms of planning for this moving forward. Is that a good overview, Len?
Yeah, that was good. So like a plant management plan like I said, we could do the monitoring this summer with volunteer effort. And recording that effort, because the grants are always a cost share, right? But your volunteer time goes towards that cost share, so, that's always helpful. That's why signing in, and stuff like that, all of that can eventually be applied to a grant if we were to get one. So, the second option she suggested where it would be, doing a survey this summer, getting a hold on what community is out there, because our lake has never had a survey done to know what our plant community is. And, so that's like step one, and I think we can get that done this summer. But then work on getting a plan written, and we can come back with what that would cost. Onterra did the one for Nokomis, I believe, and we can find out, just price it out. What would Onterra charge for aquatic plant management plan document versus, hay, and because I don't want to be that you just have to go with us because I'm here, right? I don't want, I want to be mutual. I'm not here for the work. I told you already, I came up here to get away from working, but I will work, on making our lake usable, okay? So that's what I mean. We'll get a couple costs on it to make sure that we're not out here just to make a buck, right?
Well,
We're here to improve the lake.
Len, and I think an important component of this too is, as my background is kind of our lakes team at Hay is really this grant and planning perspective, where Len's really been the expert on sampling and monitoring and that stuff. So I think that, in terms of a cost, again, of doing the survey and getting the management plan together this year, I mean, Len, that's up to you on how much, you feel like you can take on as, a volunteer, and what other tools you may have in the toolbox with the folks on the lake that you feel like you can maybe do the whole survey by yourself, or again, what sort of support you need from us. But again, I mean, my goal here is hopefully to coach you guys through this and provide, whatever professional expertise you need in terms of plan writing and grant writing. But again, knowing that like every other, lake group out there, you guys are really trying to, use your dollars as wisely as you can. And in this case, I do think it makes sense to, again, get ahead of the survey and the planning this year. And again, understanding what your internal capacity is really going to guide, what we would suggest, you should be reaching out to another consultant, again, whether it be Hay or Ontario, whomever, in order to provide support for.
And obviously our budget right now is completely nothing. We have no money. None of us have, there's been no fundraising or anything like that. So I've talked with several other people, and they, one guy said he'd be willing to supply a pig if we wanted to have like a pig roast party thing somewhere, and for a fundraiser. So that's something that we would have to start raising funds until we can get some grant money, Did you have something?
Yeah, when you say do a survey, so is that a visual survey? And then like, is it only when it breaks the water, or how do you?
So the DNR has a protocol, and this is what we use when we sample for aquatic plants. You create a grid of the lake through GPS or through GIS, and you go to each point in that grid, which are generally 60 meters apart, and you throw a rake overboard, measure depth, scoop the rake up, and then you rate the rake. Easy for me to say, right? Rate the rake on as far as the density on the rake from 0 to 5, and then you identify all the plants, and you rate the plants 0 to 4 in abundance, or 1 to 4 in abundance on the rake, and then you do that at every point until you get to a point where it's too deep for plants to grow. Unfortunately, I believe on our lake, plants grow at all depths of our lake. So
But it's 60 meters squared.
Yeah, 60 meters square, every point, every 60 meters. And I brought one of these along if you're interested in it. This is available on the DNR's website, but I have email addresses for most of you. I can share everything that I brought tonight with you. If you wanted to take this copy, you can have that, but that explains everything there. So what would happen is I'd come out with a GPS unit, and we would motor to each point or paddle, however we could get there, and we'd sample each point to get a density and distribution of the plants across the lake. We know that it's inundated with plants if it's anything like last year, but the DNR needs to have data in order to present any management recommendations or help, I guess you can say.
The survey can be volunteer.
Yep. You need somebody there that knows their plants and has the equipment. And then, like I said, I would be willing to volunteer my time on. And you're gonna, about when do you do it? You want to do it when they're in full growth. So July-ish time frame. Everything should be up and growing good and well by then. So ironically, I have a week's vacation in July, so we could work something out to a couple days in July to hammer out the plant survey on the lake. Hopefully, so something like that. Yeah.
We've already voted to stock 500 walleyes out in the lake.
Mhm.
I could take that $1,500 and donate it to this instead of stocking this year to give us a start.
And that's something that's open for discussion. I don't want to be the one that say, yeah, because then it's like, he's the one who said we couldn't put walleyes in our lake. I don't want to be that guy. But no, right. Well, that's the one thing is with the plants is people can't have as much access out there. So the fish aren't getting harvested, so to say, as much because people can't really get out there. But yeah, that's something that's obviously open for discussion.
Yeah.
I don't want, like I said, that's good to know type of a thing. So yeah,
Yeah, well, my question is because I'm not real thrilled about the idea of chemicals.
sure.
So I want to, how fast does the milfoil grow? And how many times a summer would you have to, if you got a harvester, would you have to go through the harvester to keep the milfoil down?
So milfoil grows quite rapidly. What happens is it grows early, so it shades out all the native plants, and as you saw, it grows and tops out, and then it goes out. So if you had, say, there's companies that'll come in and harvest, and it's pretty much that's like mowing your lawn. So you'd be having to have them out here monthly, likely, and they would be more or less just cutting access lanes. They couldn't. It wouldn't be cost effective to cut the entire lake like you mow your lawn. It would be very expensive, and then you have to have a place for the disposal of the cut plants.
Just for some additional context here, there are lots of lakes throughout the state that have purchased their own, basically aquatic lawnmowers. There are these kind of large boats that are specifically designed to cut and pull these plants out of the bottom. And again, there's one lake group that I work with in particular has 3 different pieces of equipment that they run basically year round and have staff employed to drive those around. And again, can really only get navigation lanes cleared for the majority of the season. I mean, this stuff is really gnarly, and that's why it's become such a big problem throughout the state, and why people resorted to spending big money on things like chemicals. That, again, there's one in particular fairly recently that does a pretty good job of just targeting that species, but it's really a large scale issue throughout the state. You guys are not the only ones dealing with this.
So I used to work for the health department in Lake County, Illinois, and with the lakes management team, and that was 15, 20 years ago now, but this was they were just starting to experience this kind of stuff down there at that time. It was going a little bit more than what it is now, but the milfoil has migrated to northern Wisconsin, and we've experienced all different types of management strategies, and the chemical companies have been really working hard to find something that's safe and really works. So they've developed a chemical that's Priscillacor, made by CPro Corporation, and it pretty much targets only milfoil. It will target the native. There is native milfoil, believe it or not, but the stuff we're worried about is the Eurasian water milfoil. But it only targets milfoil, and the company guarantees its effectiveness for 3 years. And the lakes that have used it, Muskellunge Lake in Vilas County is a local one that I know of has used it, and some lakes down in southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois that have used it. It's been very successful, where it hasn't shown up for like 4 years, and all of a sudden there's milfoil again, and 90% of the time the milfoil shows up just off of a boat ramp. Again, back to that education that, you know, somebody likely came from another lake, that one little piece of milfoil is all it takes to inundate the water. So they have chemical out there that is very effective on it, and it's not something you don't have to use annually or twice a year or anything like that. It's once every 4 or 5 years or more to knock it back. So, but yeah, there are harvesting crews, but just to keep up with it would be nonstop all week for a lake our size. And then there's it's a company in Minocqua, actually. Aquatic Plant Management is their name. They do the chemicals. They do hand pulling, and they have this thing called DASH. It's diver assisted suction harvesting, where divers go in and they suck out the milfoil. They can target just a certain kind of plant, and it's like a big hose, and they suck it out. And that's something that the DNR, that's one of the steps they want us to kind of go through: the education, then the DASH, hand pulling DASH, and then finally they'll let you do something more chemically. But harvesting and that is all steps they want you to go through and show that those are not effective enough. And then finally, the last thing would be the chemicals. So that's what you're concerned about, and so is the DNR. And that's why it's a process to get to that, essentially. Yeah.
At the last meeting, I think Scott brought up the 13-year-old water table protocols, and that we were on the low end of one. I guess my question would be, if the water table goes up and we get back to a couple normal winters, would nature wipe a lot of this out?
Nature would set it back
Okay.
for sure, but you'll be on that cycle again, that 13 years or whenever water table starts going back down, that seed bank is still there. Milfoil is one that once it's here, it's gonna grow early and rapidly and shade out, like I said, shade out the natives. If you had the natives only, that water table cycle is, they're used to that. Milfoil can adapt, like any invasive species. That they like in Europe and Asia, it's not out of control, but it gets into our environment and it's like gangbusters. You put some of our plants over there and they're a problem. So just like carp, carp over there aren't a problem. Here they're not here, but they're a problem type of a thing. So
Do you know where we are on that 13-year cycle?
I don't know. Right. No, I could make up a number and you would believe me because I would say it with authority, but I don't know. I don't know where we are on that. And I would say we're probably still low, because the lakes in general, I mean, look at what the flowage, granted they have to keep water flowing, but that's been dropping by August every year, and that wasn't normal before either. So I think the water table in the ground water table is low, and that's keeping the lake levels low as well. So. And will that come back up? We really need a lot of precipitations.
Been reading a little bit about weevils. Has anybody had any success with that?
So there are lakes that I've worked with that use the milfoil weevil. It does work. What it does is the weevil gets in the stem of the milfoil, weakens it, makes it collapse, and so it doesn't grow as well. But what happens with weevils, it's a biological control. They only target Eurasian water milfoil. So when the milfoil will die back, and then when there's no milfoil for a couple of years, the weevils go away, and then the milfoil will come back. So it'll be kind of cyclic with the weevils, milfoil. But it is something that does work, but it won't eradicate it by any means.
Is that something maybe in between treatments that a guy could do?
Yeah. Once say looking long term, and that can be stuff that ends up in a management plan. But looking long term, yeah. Once the milfoil starts coming back, you start to see it come back after, say, a treatment. You introduce the weevil, and you can actually. That's the purple stripe, not the milfoil. But you can introduce the weevil, and that might help you to control it before it starts getting eradicated. But what else you can do is once you start seeing the milfoil coming back, instead of doing a full lake treatment, you can start targeting the areas of where the milfoil is with a treatment versus the weevil, and the chemical would be more effective than the weevil.
And one thing to note here. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say the weevil is an option.
Yeah, one thing to note here is that like these strategies and the potential efficacy and the potential, again, regulations and strategies of using all of these techniques kind of together is really what we call integrated pest management. So it's kind of an adaptive practice of, we tell you guys not we tell you guys, but we develop a plan together that says, here's some of the options that we could use in order to help manage the water milfoil on the lake. Preliminarily, here's what we think is going to be really effective. Here's what we think may not work because of the, particular depths or other, biotic mutualism that's going on in the lake and that stuff too. And then we can kind of use that as again, true toolbox in order to address how we can manage these things moving forward. And if we have a small outbreak in a specific location after treatment, maybe we do dash, or maybe we have the option to do this or that. Or if, we come back and we have a really warm winter and we have really high water levels and there's a lot of nutrients flowing through the system and we have an explosion again, here's some of our strategies that we're going to use in order to target kind of those larger scale influxes of that plant material. So again, it's really this development of a plan is really a tool that you guys can use to strategically manage the milfoil issue from year to year, and as things change and as you find success with some strategies and not with others.
Any of you guys folks aware of the town of Lynn having a management plan put together back in 99, I think it was. So in this management plan, section 5, this is our option if the Willow Region Sportsman's Club wouldn't want to be a recipient of the grant. It says in here, let me find it. I should have marked it because I do this every time. Creation. Yeah, it says. So it talks about the surface water in here, and in here, it says that streams within the town are class 2, however, Little Somo is class 1, Lamer Springs is also class 1. Willow Reservoir, Pier Lake, and Muscatine Lake are class 2, and Willow Lake is class 3. But back here, it's somewhere it said that they were going to be. Right here, the recommended water quality management plan. And in here, it said that it's intended to provide direction to the town in its efforts to maintain the quality lake life. Protect and maintain public health, promote public comfort and convenience through environmentally and sound management of vegetation, fishery and wildlife populations in and around the town's water bodies. So it said in this plan that the town accepted that they would protect the vegetation in the lakes, because the lakes is what draws people to the area to buy property, to live on the lake or have access to the lake, which that is the tax base that funds the town. So that's why they did something like this. So that's something as well. And then goal number 4 was to effectively control the quantity and density of aquatic plant growth in the portions of the town's waters, in the portion of the town's waterways and lakes to better facilitate water-related recreation and improve aesthetic value of the resource. So that's two of the 5 goals under the water quality management part that address exactly what our problem is. Granted, this plan was written back in 1999 or 2000.
I think that's part of the, that most of Wisconsin came under was the 10-year plan.
Yeah.
Everybody had to come with their boilerplate document.
Okay.
The town of Lynn, I think, is pretty much keeping appropriate distance from regulating the water bodies, because the town doesn't own water bodies. They can tell you what they want to do as far as what their recommendations would be, and how you want to work towards protecting, but for the township to get involved with that, we can't fix our road.
Right.
So,
But this, what I would be looking at more is not funding from the town, but just to have them be a facility. Right.
It's skeleton document, but when they did the 10-year plan, they didn't want to do it. And
Sure.
some towns neglected it. And I don't know how it's not upon them, but I don't think so. But anyway, that was a real big deal. Back then in the days, probably Dale Rice.
Sure.
And so.
But my point just was that maybe they would be somebody we could approach and say, we're looking to get a grant. We don't have an organization set up to do this. It's kind of like I said, it's a generic plan or boilerplate plan, but would they be willing to take the money and we would use it for our?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I would think that going the route of the sportsman's club.
That's our first choice.
We were working on trying to enlighten people on the risks of the mine. Some years ago, Baz was kind enough to offer his 501(c)(3),
right?
C3 elemental B.
Right.
But he helped us immensely with that, and it was a big deal because just applying for that certification or whatever was over our heads.
Yep.
For a bunch of people who were not lawyers.
And then there's tax requirements where you gotta submit stuff, every year to the state to show that.
I want to add to that would be the fastest route rather than forming a lake association for Willow and a lake association for Pier. That would take a lot of time and effort.
Yep.
Rather
And
than
then
Is the sportsman club willing to be the entity, or?
that's why we invited them here tonight to hear us out, and he'll have to take it back to them. The kind of what we outlined a little bit here is we have a little bit of time till like July, August, but before we really would submit for a grant, because it's due in September. So we got a little bit of time yet, but that's the main thing, is we need to find somebody that can be the grant recipient. And if it's the Sportsman's Club, that would be great. make our
Let-
lives.
I'm thinking this was this meeting, I don't wanna take a lot of your time asking duplicate questions, but, 400 acre lake. I know the way this chemical works, from what I've read, is you only do isolated areas where your heaviest concentrations might be, or however that's determined.
Yep.
That's understandable why we want to do the survey. Then you're saying before you get to the point of applying any chemical into the lake, you have to show due diligence and trying manual harvesting or some kind of the other
Mhm.
acronyms that you have to do.
Right.
Fix harvesting prior to doing, it sounds like those costs are substantial. I've heard random numbers on chemical, I know it's not inexpensive. If these grants come about, and let's say everything, each one of these steps could be covered by a grant, is it, are you looking at 50/50? I mean, what is the
Oh,
percentage of the grant
fi-
coverage?
Kirsten,
I
do
can
you know
speak to
the,
that. Yep.
Yeah.
So depending on what kind of grant that we're looking at, again, in this case, it seems like we're talking about actual implementation. So when you know, and the fall is again the grant cycle of when you're submitting these grants. So, you know, you kind of make an assessment based upon the prior year of what the strategy is going to be, and then you submit a grant for that. And the implementation grants in particular, which again would cover DASH or Clean Boats, Clean Waters, or some of these other things, you know, there's a little bit of a range here, but the match is usually 75% DNR cost share, and that other 25% is what's handled by the grantee. So that could be volunteer hours, that could be cash match. You know, there's a whole list of descriptors of what can be eligible in that category. And then the total grant award will generally range between $50,000 and $150,000. So again, it is totally going to depend on, again, what your strategy is for, you know, that specific year and what you're applying for. But again, that 75% is usually where the DNR is supporting activities like those AIS implementations.
So 75-25 type of a deal.
When you talk about your 3 or 4 year window of effectiveness of the plan, is that happening on plants that were in the water on the day you did your application? Or what about the plants that the guy might bring in on his boat unwillingly? Is that plant not affected because your water has flushed through the lake
Correct.
repetitively?
Correct.
A shallow lake. As I can't remember from the knowledge you gave to Madison, but I know that stuff, being shallow doesn't help.
No, right. Being shallow doesn't help. There's a residence time of the water in our lake is probably very short because it flows through relatively quickly because we're shallow. But the chemical, that's where that Clean Boats, Clean Waters program comes into play is the education.
But I'm just
So, but yeah, if somebody were to come in with some plants on their boat, that would be
So those
a trade.
plants acted by the 3 or 4 year
No.
window of time.
But what happens is if the plants show up in that window and you have the warranty, because of course that's an extra cost from C-Pro, they warranty it, but that's like you're buying the warranty. For like that 3-year warranty, if it shows up, they'll come out and they'll treat that area where it showed up.
For the price.
If you bought the warranty. Mhm. So,
I'm trying to think how we get ahead of this and permanently do it. And the last question I have, guys.
no, this is why we're here. Hopefully everybody.
Has anyone tried to just totally, sunlight on the ice? By using my thought of that, we got UW Madison. These people, I know their budgets are cut. They're the biggest single entity in the world in Wisconsin. So why isn't somebody taking, let's say, white plastic sheets, 1 acre over, wherever we find a big spot, anchor it in the wintertime. It's gotta be white, because if it's black, the sun will hit it, it'll melt the ice. So if you do it, you wanna anchor it and hold it down and see if that spot
I know.
can kill it over 4 months.
I know people have used bottom barriers that work, you know, where they actually put the thing, but you're right. You're doing it on top of the ice. I don't know of anything that, no one that's tried that, but again, talking with other people in the industry, because it's been conference season for us. So I talked with other people at these conferences, and explained our situation, and they're like, there are research grants out there too, where maybe you approach the DNR and say, hey, our lake is a tributary to the Willow flowage. The Willow flowage, yes, has Eurasian water milfoil, but most of their milfoil is on the north end and the east end. Not a whole lot of it over here on our end. Granted, our end gets the shallowest, the earliest in the year, so there's not as much water for it to grow. But now that we've got the milfoil and the density that we had it last year, it's just going to flow down and it could inundate this part of it. So that's something we could approach the DNR. One of our strategies could be, hey, can we get like a research grant to do some of this stuff on our lake to keep the milfoil from getting on this end of the flowage. So, you know, there's a lot of possibilities out there for sure.
25, 400-acre lake, Pier Lake is 290,
Yeah, it's 290.
150,000 is the cap.
Right, that's generally what they,
What,
like,
Scott,
Scott-
your number of $6,000 per acre, was that? I can't.
Scott had mentioned that he's in charge of the lakes in, what was it, Oneida, Vilas, this area up here. And I forget the number, he had a huge number that I did find my, there was a
Are you
huge
talking about
number
the
of
research grants?
well, no, he's in charge of distributing 2.5 million in invasives. Or no, yeah, surface water grants, $6.5 million is what he distributes up here. But he said,
See the DNR guy?
yes,
Yeah, okay.
he's also got the most lakes in the state, so and I did talk to him just 2 weeks ago at the Wisconsin Lakes and Rivers Conference a little bit. He was asking what has happened since our meeting. I said, what's happened is we have another meeting planned this week. So, but so he knows that he actually remembered me from that first meeting, which was, I thought was a good thing. He didn't run away from me. He came up to me and asked me. I didn't make a horrible impression, I guess. Some people run away from me when they see me. But any other questions?
So what can we
Our first steps would be to get a survey done this year and start fundraising so that we can get an aquatic plant management plan written. As a group, that's what we want to do, and we want to hopefully get the Sportsman's Club to agree to help us with the grant part.
just like a GoFundMe page?
Can try that, right? GoFundMe takes a portion of it, obviously, but having buckets out at Hillside, Bucksnord and J&D's for donations for the milfoil fund or something like that, or like I talked to Marty, he said he'd be willing to get a pig and if we wanted to get together and have like a pig roast fundraiser type of a thing, maybe with the help of the Sportsman's Club or somewhere. So there's ideas have been floating around out there for fundraising, but that's going to be the biggest thing is the funding. Because say we get just to make numbers easier for me to say we get $100,000 grant, we have to come up with say 25,000, but it doesn't need to be $25,000 cash. It can be the volunteer hours and stuff like that. Because for each person, they have a number, I don't know what just picking numbers again, like $15 an hour for volunteer help, that counts towards it, that kind of a thing. So
We gotta start documenting those hours.
documenting hours, like we got here. What do we have? 15 people at $15 an hour. We're here for an hour. You know, that
Books.
right there.
It all adds up.
Right, all will end up adding up.
Jeff and myself were talking to another fellow, would just be raffle tickets, you should get some raffle prizes and
Yep.
some raffle tickets for the milfoil issue and.
Yep,
That's always, you throw some guns on there, everybody's willing to take the camera.
Exactly. exactly. Yep.
But there again, you need a license.
Yeah,
If you do a drawing, you gotta have a license from the state, which we
Can't the sports and.
You thought we might,
I'm just saying, you gotta have a license, but.
Yep. Right.
We do, but I'm just saying,
we have to.
you can do raffles on that, but.
that's why I'm glad you showed up tonight, because you're here now.
And so you gotta realize I'm sick for a week and a half, and I drove from Janesville today just to come to.
Oh, goodness.
If we were gonna draw one of those thermometers for our fundraiser, I think it's helpful for us to have an idea with your background. I don't know if you dealt with sort of 400 acre shallow lakes. You're in Bolo,
I'm in Volo right now, yes.
I grew up in Lake Zurich and we had a bunch of lakes.
Yeah.
Size, but I think
Yeah.
it's gotta be serious.
Yep.
Down there too. So I just didn't know, instead of inventing the wheel and taking a stab in the dark, I can guarantee you, if you look at us, I'm gonna see us all in our bathing suits out there pulling weed in a couple of years.
You had a weird smile on your face when you were saying that.
And people want to taller people. We know what kind of bug you're gonna be. But I mean, this is a lot. And to make sure that people understand. You could easily, I mean, $100,000, looking at 25 grand, and you've got some opportunities to earn 10 of that, but 15,000, that might not be realistic. Pick up one of the two lakes. And that's where I really wonder if there is some help out there that we could get just to understand how big is this project, and most likely, but when we have 700 acres between the two lakes. I think Pure Lake's behind us, and it's just a matter of time.
Mhm.
It's a deep lake.
Yep, yeah. And what happened likely last year is people couldn't recreate on Willow Lake. So where'd they go?
Right.
Over to Pure Lake. So exactly that, again, we can work with the DNR and Sea Grant, and we can get some signs posted at the access points. I think we might have some already. I can't remember, but just educating people, getting some new signs. Because I think the one over there, it's older sign, and people just get used to seeing the same old sign. They don't read it anymore. But if we can get some new signs, brighter, shinier, and then maybe that'll trigger them to, oh yeah, let me get these plants off of my trailer. It is a law in Wisconsin that you can't transport plants, but nobody really enforces it. Like, you don't see people pulled over because they have plants on their motor or anything like that. So, but it is a state law. So.
A lot of guys never even, they don't even think of it.
Don't even think of it.
You know, maybe even, with the printed out flyer and you put it underneath their windshield wiper,
Mhm.
you know, for that first year, when you see boats parked
Yep.
there and, well, what is that? Well, they're gonna get sick of looking at it, but at least they're gonna know it's,
Yep.
you know, what it's about.
Yep.
You know,
It just sounds like that would be
What's that? Be part of the volunteer.
That's part of the education aspect of helping out. Yep.
I know Crescent Lake over towards Rhinelander, they got a guy, well, probably a couple people that volunteered to stand there and watch.
Yep, there's the clean waters, clean boats, clean waters program that the state has. You can take a training and you can say, I'm going to work at this boat launch, or I'm going to work the 3 access points. Couple hours here, couple hours there, couple hours there, couple hours over there on pier, and they usually pick the peak weekends or the peak days, which are usually weekends and holidays, and they just educating people. But yep, that's.
So, if, get back to the survey, if you're doing every 60 meters, which is what, 65 yards on a 400-acre lake, you have to document every single point that you do. It's a DNR is gonna see it. How long would it take you? I mean, because you can't do till fall.
Well, you do it like the July-ish, and it'll take you. Yeah. You can take, you can be the most. But, no. See, this is how it is, and you visit each point, and usually in a lake, it's more bowl shaped, so you wouldn't have stuff maybe in it, but in our lake we will, yeah, it'll take you a while.
Would that be something that you would have to supervise on each one, you being the scientist, or could you follow?
Probably train people, once you've done, say, a quarter of the lake, you've probably seen all of the plants that you're gonna see. So we could have a training day where we go out with a group of 6 people and then after we get trained on how we're doing it, we can split up into 3 groups of 2 and knock it out kind of that way, you know. There's ways to get it done, but we would want to try to get it done within a week or 2 week period. Long days.
Yeah, I mean, because one person got to do it.
Oh, no. Be out there all summer.
You have to do a separate report for each lake.
Yeah, you'd have one for Willow Lake and then one for Pier Lake, because Pier Lake's not as, like I say, right now it's not as bad as.
Is that because it's deeper water?
Could be the deeper water. Willow Lake is downstream of Pier Lake, which is good, so this stuff won't be floating up to Pier. But like anything is, you could get it out of here, but if it's, get rid of it upstream, it's just gonna come back down, so. Really the only other, you have other inlets coming in, but, Pier Lake is really the only one, I think, where there's a milfoil presence. I don't think the other Little Creek, is that what it's called, that comes in through the through the forest, I don't think that has a milfoil issue. But we could investigate that too, just come on some of the road crossings and see. Or if someone was bored, they could canoe and kayak it down. I'm not that bored. I'll be on the lake pulling rakes. So that's kind of where we're at, is talk with the Sportsman's Club and see if that's something they would be willing to help us out with. Obviously, I'm sure you can't just make that decision.
I probably could.
Yeah, Len,
I'm about to learn a dozen things, but
Yeah, unfortunately, that's how a lot of these clubs end up being. And maybe you look around here
the
and
biggest thing is that we might have 80 members, but we've got 6 that are active. So I can't, as far as manpower, I can't, volunteering manpower. What we did for Save the Willow was I opened up a separate account. And then any of the funds that came in to Save the Willow, we put into that account. And then rewrote that our bylaws, it's gotta be the treasurer and the president that sign the checks. So what we did was we signed the checks and we handed them to Jeff. And we let Jeff, whatever he needed, whether it was gonna be radio ads or whatever, he did that, and it just kept me informed of what he was writing, so that we could keep track of the money and the funds. And I'm sure the board would not have a problem. The biggest things that I can see right now is if we get a grant for $100,000, I'm just gonna.
Yep.
Easy numbers. We get a grant for 100,000. The DNR gives us 75, 25 has to come from this entity. We don't have a lot of money in the Sportsman's Club where we can afford to take a hit of 25 grand to make sure that we match the grant.
And that can be something in an agreement. If we want to have an agreement that says, this community of Willow Pier, whatever we come up with,
Yeah.
is responsible for the match. And, something like that. But you look, you know, like, and I'm used to this with other organizations I belong to, is, yeah, you have 80 members and you have the same 6 that do everything. And you're looking around here tonight, hey, we're concerned about the lakes, and maybe this is an opportunity that we're concerned about our lakes. We want their help. Let's help them as well, type of a thing. You know, we gotta step up and help.
Has anybody
Yeah.
checked with the town to see if they'd be willing to do a special assessment?
Yeah, that would have to go through probably a referendum. Yeah. Yeah, and we're gonna get hammered again. So I've been through situations where they've done like special service area taxing districts for some lake management stuff, like Wonder Lake, if you're familiar with Northern Illinois, and the Loon Lakes. And it's always a heated issue whenever you're doing something on somebody's taxes.
Did that and divide the community. I know.
Well, my thoughts on it are, everybody in the town is going to benefit. But there's gonna be a certain percentage of people that won't have nothing to do with it, won't put no effort towards it,
Yeah.
or support any of the fundraisers or anything, but they're gonna get the same benefits as everybody else.
It's a noble thought, and I'm not saying it's a bad idea. What Kathy's alluding to is Tuesday, the referendum for the school passed. So you've got 4 more years of increased taxes coming that you haven't, it hasn't hit your tax bill yet.
Yeah.
This happened Tuesday. And it's $950,000.
They do that every year or so when we live.
Yeah.
Well, so just so you're aware that now we've got a road that, we've got a grant for 1/3 of Willow Road, where the leftover third is over $1 million. This is between 110, 120 people that live in the double township, 72 square miles. And who's gonna pay for that? So, I mean, the lake is, unfortunately, from the other elements that you have, we can't really fight the school. The road's critical to get in and out to see the lake. So it's like, what do you need first, water or air? And then if you need one, you can deal them pretty quick. And so it's just trying to make priorities. I don't know if I ask you, and you're welcome to. I mean, that would be a thing to bring up to the town board. But it's not, you know, no idea is a bad idea.
No.
It's, you know, it's good to think of all the different opportunities that we can have. My concern is not knowing how much money this could entail and how much it would entail just to get to the point of applying for the piece of the action where we start putting chemicals in the lake. To me, that sounds like the number of man hours just to do survey work and to get people educated and doing that appropriately and to meet the DNRs, because I know they're gonna say the more you do, the better. It's one of those things, the people who get grants do an outstanding job of, so, you know, we can get all our 16 and 20-year-old kids together and say, help us. They so we don't have any. So, now maybe the football team would come out because, you know, that's how they, I know, because between here and there, there's 5 lakes. So that's, and they probably all get melted. So that's the real problem. This problem is huge. And I've been on visiting this lake my whole life, so I've got as much desire to want to fix it as anybody. It's this is just up to their hands from. Get it all done, you're clean, and a guy makes a mistake with a boat. And how fast do they go from that one crumb to where we're at today? It seems like it's pretty darn hard to kill. If we could find some really good things, if we get high on milfoil. And you don't want to answer. You want to find a good practical use for milfoil. And figure out where to throw it away.
Maybe it's a new CBD.
Absolutely.
It does, once it's out of the water, it dries up, because it's 90% water, the plant is, it dries up and it crumbles down to about nothing, so. Disposal is, yeah, initially you have a huge amount of it, but in a few months, it's.
And then it becomes inert.
Right, once it's dried out in crumbs, it's done. So,
Again, I don't know if you can put you on the spot with this, as far as you mentioned some of the chemicals that were attacking milfoil specifically, as this problem is expanding, is the technology expanding to keep up with it? That, I mean, if we run 4 corners and run out the clock in 4 or 5 years, there's something that, yeah, it's gonna be very inexpensive and put it
That's-
there and it takes care of it, is the, the consensus of the.
So
taking place here.
Yep, the reason this new chemical has come around, because, what they used to use was a chemical 2,4-D, and it comes in a bunch of different trade names, but that was the chemical. And then there's actually milfoil is developing a resistance, there's 2,4-D resistance strength, because they evolve over time. So this new chemical came out, so it's very expensive in its first few years here. I mean, it's been around now for probably almost 10 years. So the price is coming down a little bit because it's more of a supply demand thing. So it was new, they didn't have a whole lot of it. Now they're making a lot more of it and it's being used a lot more. So the price is coming down on it. But yeah, there'll be something else that comes along, I'm sure. These chemical companies and even management companies are coming up all the time with better ways of applying it and ways of using it, and then new stuff as well. And whether it's a combination of, suction harvesting, mechanically harvesting, and chemicals, they try to incorporate as much as they can. These companies are, like I said, the local one is the Aquatic Plant Management Group in Minocqua. But then there's other ones, Tigris, they do a lot of work around here too. It used to be Clark Aquatic. They do a lot of work around here in lakes as well, so.
Some of these other techniques like the suctioning and to what extent, I mean, how much of an area, and you obviously do a test area.
Yeah, they would, generally, again, it's for access to an area of open water. They'll like I'll call it vacuum. It's essentially what it is they'll suction harvest an area out, like a channel out to a main body of water. That generally when they're suction harvesting, they're getting it from the root, so it doesn't come back until next year, because they're only getting an area of it, and it's like grass that'll migrate back into that area and grow back up. So
So you're saying they gotta try these techniques, so they do that, say they would do that technique, then you wouldn't be able to revisit that till next year and
Right.
see what it is.
right.
That's the step you took first, and that's a year.
Then you do another plant survey and it says, nope, we still have it just as bad as it was before, or it's decreased this year by 10% or because you can have those percentages.
So
Doing
then
your-
say that, then you have to try another method.
Well, what they did, and this is a good example, like I was saying, they went through these surveys and the dash and harvesting, and then finally, when they showed that it wasn't gonna work, in 2020, they got approved to use chemical. But they started in 2016, so it took 4 years of hoops with them showing, that it wasn't working. And now their plant surveys out there now are done twice a year, totally by lake residents. They go around and they only go to the areas where milfoil was found previously, and then they'll do kind of a meander survey looking for other areas, because their lake is clear, they can see down other areas where milfoil might be present. Sample that, but generally if you can keep it confined to an area, once you get it under control and keeping it confined.
Just the way we saw it floating on the top of somebody that lake last year.
Yeah.
So if you get grant money, does that grant money have to be used in that fiscal year, or can it be banked?
No, it has to be used in that fiscal year. Right on that? Fall asleep. Kristen, you're muted.
Oh, excuse me, I missed that. What?
So with the grant money, does it have
Oh,
to be
the
used in
grant
that fiscal
cycle?
year?
No.
Yeah,
The
so
grant
say,
cycle is usually 2 or 3 years. Again, it depends on exactly what the treatment is and what the approach is, but you have a little bit of leeway usually within the grant that if, there's special circumstances or things change, you do have flexibility and don't just lose money.
okay, good. So 2 to 3 years to eat it up.
So if you did one method, you basically could have maybe two grants, maybe even 3 grants on your belt. To actually, when you would be okay to use some other method, now you have the money if the grant, well.
Yeah, there's still that match.
Come up with the match.
That's still that match component, right? And,
But at least you're not wasting that money in 1 year when you're not implementing it the right way.
right. Mhm.
But you still have to come up with money to do these alternative things prior to the chemicals too.
And there are, like I said, there are those opportunities. Like I said, this is a good, example to kind of follow and Dave, Joe, Jeff, with Muscatine Lake Association. He put this together. That kind of outlines that's what they've done to date, which is pretty amazing. They've got several grants. Started out with like a $20,000 grant for the divers. They contracted for the DASH program, the divers to pull Eurasian water milfoil. 2 days of that was $20,000. Right. Well, how it works, so they're down there sucking it right out by the roots.
Yeah.
Right. So, but yeah, and then they got a grant for the management plan, that was 50,000. So, but yeah, this is a good
How
document.
big was that, like? 278.
Yeah. Yeah, 270 acres. Mostly shallow. It does have one deep hole that's like 20 feet, 19 feet deep. This is over in Vilas County, over by Saint Germain. Muskellunge, not this Muskellunge. There's like 4 Muskellunge lakes up here. And okay. Yeah, this is in Vilas County, just over by Saint Germain off of G.
That's close where he's talking.
Yeah, I thought that was a big lake. I thought it was a deep lake.
It's 20 feet deep at its deepest point, and it, 270?
270 acres.
Yeah, 270 acres. 2 years ago, the muskie tournament that Eagle River does, the winning muskie was caught right off my cousin's dock. Saw the guy taking the picture and releasing it, and saw it was the winner. So it's from that lake. So there are muskie in it. But yeah, that's a kind of a good example. So, I do have cards. If you have questions or wanted to follow up, you can reach out to me as well. I'll leave them up here if you want to grab one. But yeah, have any other questions or anything or more for tonight?
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
wait and hear what you guys decide if we want to have more of a one-on-one call or talk or
Well, we can have another meeting till June, so I'm gonna have to call a special or call people and do a survey. Or
Sure.
what you say, but I'm not gonna wait till June, that's too far away.
right.
But I can get a hold of the members.
And if they have any questions, if they have any questions or if we want to do a Zoom or
Who's your number 2 guy now?
Pardon?
Who's your number 2 guy? No, you're number one, but,
Yeah, I'm number 2 and 3.
I mean, as far as, I know you had, for us, you had to open the account. You both had to go in and sign.
Oh, my treasurer is Pat Futura. He's up on Wampsauger.
I don't, somebody I don't.
Yeah, she's our treasurer, so she's the second person.
Okay, so I'm just wondering about, the logistics of that. That's always cumbersome, and appreciate it coming up from Janesville for this.
Yeah, thank you.
So I guess
Very appreciative.
how, what's the timeline on the grants then? You gotta do the paperwork and have it submitted by September, you're right?
Yes, September, is it September 1st or September 30th, Kirsten?
It's usually September 15th, but they release a new like grant guidance every year, which is going to be coming up in probably a couple weeks now, and that'll have the confirmed date. But yeah, it's usually September 15th, and then you learn of the award in February, sometimes late January, and then the grant cycle starts and the grant agreements get signed in mid-March, so about March 15th.
Basically, at this point in time, all you need is all of my numbers.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
I
What was
should say
that?
mine, the sportsman's club numbers,
Right. That you're, yeah,
my FIN number and all of that.
right. Is there, I think a W9 is part of this.
Yeah, that Appendix J in that document I sent along has all of the unique eligibility criteria that we can use as a kind of checkbox list to make sure that all of the paperwork and all the numbers and stuff like that is in order to proceed with the Sportsman's Club if they so choose to do so.
So who's gonna draw up the agreement?
That's something that we would work.
You would work with us on?
Exactly.
Well, I'll get a card from you and within 2 weeks I'll get back to you,
Perfect.
if that's enough.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
I don't really see a problem at this point. Most of the time they go along with it, very same thing.
Right, us, make sure that you think of the things you want to be held harmless.
Right.
I know you did a good job thinking that stuff with us. Again, that's years ago, and those needs might have changed, I don't know.
And it's also, look around. He even said it's a pretty much an organization of 6 people with 80 members. Like I said, I'm a member because I join every year at the picnic. You need, I don't get any communication, I guess, but if there's some way that you need help with something, reach out to the people right here, right now that are saying, we want your help. What can we
If I
do?
get your email,
Yep.
you should be in the minutes of our meetings.
Yeah, they have my personal email, but I
Haven't received
haven't
them yet?
received them. So.
Double check that, and
Yeah.
they're gonna hate to do all that too.
No worries. No worries. So. Yep.
That's what I had. He says something about that. Looking for volunteers. I retired and I thought, but still.
Sure. Yeah, and when are you thinking about doing? Probably be like July timeframe.